As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're very privileged to have a returning guest. Bix Weir, founder of Roota.com, is here with us again on Reluctant Preppers. Bix, thanks for joining us.
Sure, anytime.
Now, we had you last shortly before the Clinton-Trump U.S. presidential election, and now it's just over 3 weeks since the election, and there's been a lot of fallout and a lot of position taking, some clarification of direction, and some that still remains a mystery. But we wanted to get you to weigh in on your take, first of all, of the election results themselves and what it reveals about the state of representative democracy in the U.S. and the freedom of elections, the voice of the people, that sort of thing. If you could give us sort of your perspective on what the election reveals about the state of democracy in America.
Well, you're not going to like this answer. I don't think it reveals anything about the state of democracy. I think the vote was rigged, absolutely was rigged by both sides. You know, the question is, democracy is an interesting thing in that it allows the majority a say over the minority. We were always a republic, but a representative republic. But I get the whole idea. There hasn't been a free election since the invention of electronic voting. And that was in the 70s and 80s. So, yeah, it wasn't a free election. The question really is what's going on behind the scenes, the battle between the good guys and the bad guys. That's where, you know, if you're looking for freedom for the United States, that's where it's coming from. And the election of Trump means that the good guys had the power to stop the rigging or to rig it themselves. Obviously, if you look into who owns the electronic voting machines, that would be partners and associates of George Soros, which is not a good thing. He's knee-deep in rigging. So the fact that Trump won and he was not the candidate picked by what I call the bad guys, those people in charge of our lives, tells us a lot right there that we really are taking out these guys. And I expect massive turbulence over the next few months and even into the beginning of next year before the change happens, the changes and the transition out of the unbacked fiat monetary system and into some sort of new monetary system. But that will only happen through a crash, and that's where we're headed.
You know, you mentioned the vote rigging and the actual electronic voting, how that has enabled that. But what is the meaning of a recount in that kind of a world? People back in the days of paper ballots and that sort of thing, a recount was people could understand what that meant. But what does it mean when it's in the current era of electronic voting?
That's the hysterical part. The electronic voting, recounting an electronic vote. What are you gonna run the number again? So yeah, there would be, if any recount was taken seriously. The whole idea behind the recount was to try to delay the electoral college, Trump from getting the full electoral college vote of over 270 voters. Because that is needed. The Electoral College has to vote on December 19th. And after December 19th, all those votes go to Congress, and Joe Biden, the head of the Senate, will open the votes on January 3rd, count the votes, and the president-elect will be officially a president-elect. What the bad guys are trying to do is throw some doubt into that scenario. These recounts, their idea was let's try to get a recount going that would take a long time. That's why they're asking for the votes to be counted manually, even the electronically placed votes to be counted manually. But they want the recount to take a long time, so it goes past the December 19th date, thus not giving Trump enough electoral votes to win outright. He needs 270 to win outright. And if he doesn't win outright, when the votes are open on January 3rd, then the House and the Congress will both vote on who should be president, since the House and the House and the Senate. And since the House and the Senate have the majority Republican, the Republicans would nominate Trump unless, you got some paid off congressman, which it might be as well. So there's a lot to go on between now and Inauguration Day on January 20th. I believe that the good guys are fully in charge of this. They're not going to let Clinton and the bad guys get away with pulling anything. It would be the worst thing. I mean, Jill Stein should be completely embarrassed and stuck in jail, if you ask me. She's trying to disrupt the system.
That dynamic of a minor party candidate that got a tiny percentage of the vote coming forward and demanding a recount and saying it's in the name of integrity or something. First of all, if there is widespread or voter fraud that actually influences the direction of the output, then the outcome, then I think we should all be wanting to know what the truth is. But if you think back to where we saw this litany of individuals and organizations coming forward after the Obama election, questioning the validity, for example, of Obama's U.S. citizenship, et cetera, eligibility for U.S. president, the theme we started to hear out of the courts at that time was this or that person or organization didn't have standing. They lacked standing, meaning that they really weren't in the position to be directly a plaintiff, bringing things forward to the court. Even people who, like in the armed forces, who said, I don't know that I should be following this individual because I'm not sure that he's really a legitimate, commander-in-chief over me, that kind of thing. They said, no, you don't have standing. So how does a minor party candidate whose outcome is not going to be changed in any way conceivable have, standing to demand a recount?
Well, that's part of the hysterical nature of this whole thing. Jill Stein raised $1 million in her presidential bid. I think she came in fourth or fifth, but she raised $1 million was her total amount raised, and for the recounts, I think she's raised like $8 to $10 million, something ridiculous. So obviously, there's someone else behind it, something else going on here.
Yeah, that's the other thing is if the whole thing that seemed to sway popular sentiment towards Trump through this candidacy and this president election cycle was distaste for the as he calls it, the swamp that needs to be drained, and the slimy a major party stealing nominations from their I mean, you were there blow by blow back when Ron Paul got treated the way he did in a previous election cycle, and now look what happened to Bernie Sanders from the Democrats. Look what almost happened due to what rules almost got changed and so on at the Republican National Convention. It seems that people were really the common people were really disgusted and actually relieved somewhat or confirmed to see coming out into the plain light of day some of these backdoor, smoke-filled room shenanigans that have been going on. So to now see, in the name of integrity, Jill Stein coming forward and saying, suddenly I've got this an angel donor where it's not going to be named who's giving that kind of money to get this to happen. It looks to the common person like somebody else behind the curtain is pulling the strings, and she's just being used as a puppet.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. A couple of people have thrown out, she just wants to raise a bunch of money to walk away, and that's not it. There's something going on. Because, I mean, if she is successful in stopping the process going through, if you think the Hillary Clinton people were mad about their candidate not getting the nod, imagine what the Trump supporters would do. I mean, we're talking civil war. And Jill Stein, of all people, is the one standing up and potentially throwing her hat in the ring to cause civil disruptions. People will die. I am telling you right now, people will die in the streets if this process isn't taken care of on the up and up and smoothly. And Jill Stein will be at fault. She should be tried and convicted if something happens to disrupt our constitutional form of government and the way things are set up. And that's not speaking as someone who all he cares about is Trump getting in the front door. This is a purposeful attempt to disrupt the system, and I'm surprised that that you're not hearing more about Obama saying, no, the system should go for it. But I think they have enough dirt on Obama and Biden and Clinton that they're not going to speak up too much, because if they do, then WikiLeaks will just dump all the real emails, the emails they left out. And you'll see Biden and Clinton and Obama get thrown in jail in probably 30 seconds.
Well, now you brought up the topic of forces intentionally trying to disrupt constitutional processes in our country, and intentionally trying to foment chaos and that sort of thing. Over the Obama presidency, we have seen, in contrast to the promise that was being made about being a unifier, being the president of all Americans, and that sort of thing, and how we were going to, overcome race tensions and that sort of thing, what we've seen is, some people call it race baiting. I would just at least say a very unbalanced and uncharacteristic weighing in on one side of making big national issues out of what would have otherwise been local, regional happenings, and ignoring similar things that are happening that don't fit that narrative. We've seen that in the Justice Department, zooming into different parts of the country to say we're going to come in and come in from a federal level and take over and investigate this, or we're going to actually establish support for the people who are demonstrating here, or we've seen funding coming in. Some people have said it's tied to George Soros' Open Society Foundation for either the Black Lives Matter protests or all kinds of other protests that have been happening in these events. So this Jill Stein disruption that's being created is just the most recent in a drumbeat, a series of disruptions to process where people normally. The way that you get the news, the way that things are handled by the government, the way that things are treated in society. So, what is this? What is your personal take on this apparently concerted and intentional effort to destabilize our society?
I think it's their last chance. I mean, that was the plan of Soros and the people that Soros hired to be president. Clinton and Obama. Their job was to destroy America, to take away nationalism and to destroy our borders and destroy our communities and our religion and our culture. That was the whole idea. It's not about being kind to everyone. It's about destroying national pride and destroying the country from the inside. It's long been the plan of, you go back to Marx, who talked about it in Communism. That's how you destroy the United States, is you destroy it internally. And that's what was going on, and that's what was stopped, at least so far. I think there's a lot of balls in the air for Trump to get into position to make some real calls after January 20th. He's putting neocons in certain positions because he has to, or they'll probably, take him out before the 20th. So the game is still on. It's not a sure thing yet. What is a sure thing is mass chaos in between now and probably the end of the first quarter, because that's when everything's going to get shaken up. And our bubbles of the bond market bubble is the biggest bubble in the history of the second biggest bubble in the history of mankind's finances. The first biggest bubble is a derivative bubble, and that's blowing sideways in Europe as we speak. Everything is things were going to crash anyway. The question is when. In the basement of the Treasury is where they run the computer programs to rig the markets. When are they going to click that mouse to say, okay, remove all manipulation, and all of a sudden prices have to find fair market value, true fair market value? That's how you crush and destroy a market, and nothing will survive that.
And before we leave the topic of like the political sphere, if you could weigh in, and you're already starting to frame that, but if you could, specifically looking at anticipating a Trump presidency, your view of how a Trump presidency increases and or decreases risks that people seeking preparedness need to be aware of.
Well, had Trump not won, the good guys, as I call them, who do have control of the monetary system, would have crashed it as soon as Clinton got in, because that would have destroyed Clinton in there, would have destroyed America. She would have opened the borders. We'd see the same thing happening in Germany happening in the United States. It's happening in Germany right now, where the Germans are leaving their country. They're going to South America because all these immigrants that came in, they don't sit in like a internment camp and just wait for the next thing to happen. They're out in society, living as they lived at home. They had to fight and scrape and steal and do all these bad things at home. And once they got settled in Germany, they're doing the exact same thing as if they were at home. So it is destroying the German culture, and the Germans are moving away. That's what was going to happen in America, and that's what was stopped. What was the question? I don't know.
Risk increased or risk decreased by a Trump presidency looking forward?
Well, risk in markets, both sides have to crash the markets. There's no doubt about it. Trump wants the markets to crash. He said it 50 times. We're in a bubble. He would rather have it happen before he gets into office. But as soon as he gets into office, he's already said we're going to do infrastructure projects. We're going to decrease the tax for everybody. All that does is destroy the U.S. dollar and ultimately blow it up. I think that would be the slow way to do it. The fast way to do it is what's happening in Europe right now with Monte de Pesci going under, the Italian referendums not passing, and the Deutsche Bank, our favorite bank, most likely is on its last legs in December. So would that crash the banking system, the monetary system? Of course. We're talking 50 trillion of derivatives going bad. Every single bank in the world will crash, which means the fiat monetary system would crash. So yeah, we're there. They're trying to hold it together until Trump gets in, but it might happen before. It might begin to happen starting Sunday when the Italians vote on their referendum. If the referendum does not pass, then the president of Italy said he's going to resign, which throws Monte de Pesci's bailout and will restructure out the window. And then the banks sell off, and they have over $1 trillion in derivatives too. So these dominoes start cascading, and the risk is high. Does it get worse when Trump gets into office? Probably. He wants to pull the trigger, he wants to end the Fed, and he wants to crash the markets because he wants to start fresh. He wants a clean slate, and he wants to get rid of all this debt, and that's how you do it.
Now, speaking of debt, that leads me right into my next question. The article came out today that the U.S. debt just this week passed the threshold of $19.9 trillion for the first time in history, and that by February of next year will pass $20 trillion in history. And they're talking about the Congress needing to set up a new debt ceiling of 20.1 at that time, but that by the end of next year we're going to be at 20.15 trillion anyway. And at what point does this just end? I mean, you talk about a crash, but what we've seen is that there is no end in sight, that the debt seems to just keep increasing without bounds and without limits. So what are some actual credible scenarios that you foresee that would actually cause that game to come to an end?
Well, it ends the day we want it to end. The day that the United States no longer is the kind of kingpin, the person in charge is. As long as it serves to our advantage to play this game, we're going to play it. We can end the game right now, a click of a mouse in the basement of the Treasury, and we're seeing a lot of the economic power move to Asia. That was the beginning sign. It's got nothing to do with debt. The debt isn't even real. It's an IOU to themselves. Think about it. What is the U.S. dollar? It's nothing. It's a promise to give you another U.S. dollar. And do they report the right numbers? Of course they don't. Well, first of all, we know that they don't count Social Security, which is IOU. That's debt. That's not counted in the numbers. And Medicare, Medicaid, all the future obligations are not counted in the debt numbers. So the debt's a fictional number. It's symbolic in that I think when it hits 20, everybody says, oh my God, it hit 20. They said the same thing when it hit $1 trillion. It doesn't matter. And those are just the numbers they report. I'll guarantee you that the U.S. Treasury has a secret black book where they have 150 trillion in non-reported debt. They just created out of thin air with their computers. And you can do that because you control the money. You can print a gazillion dollars with a click of, you don't have to print it anymore, with a click of a mouse and buy everything you want. And you control the price of commodities, so there's no inflation. So, the game continues and the talk continues, and the United States will end the game the very moment they choose to end it. Having Trump as president gives him the power over the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and he can end it that day.
What do you see as reasons to end the system, and then how will that affect people who've been preparing in different ways? First of all, what are the most reasonable ways to prepare for that end, and then what do you see as the reemergence of our civilization and those who have prepared properly after that?
Well, those who have prepared properly will probably be targets right away, because you're the one who has the food, the water, the money, the silver, the gold. That's why you have to have a gun as well, because you'll be the target. And the government will not let people, because everybody will be suffering, the first thing they're going to do is throw huge taxes on gold and silver and mining shares and things like that. If they're even trading, they won't even be trading. You take out the banks and you take out all markets, all electronic markets. So not worried about that. The system is, we're going through a transition. We're transitioning out of unbacked fiat money to something new. Do I think it will be gold and silver? Yeah, historically we've always gone back to gold and silver. It's our constitutional money. Will Bitcoin be involved? I think so. It's amazing technology, and the United States is clearly not clamping down on Bitcoin. They could have shut it off a long time ago, but they haven't. They've been involved in it since the very beginning. So there will be a place for Bitcoin and the blockchain going forward. But the first thing to do, though, is you need to take out these bad guys, the banks and the banksters, and the people that control them, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Soroses and the Clintons and the Bushes, and they'll all come down. They get their power from the unbacked fiat system. If you take that system down, they have no power, zero. So that's what we're kind of headed towards. Hopefully Trump will be in the presidential office by then, and then he can hire people he wants to hire, which I think he's half doing that now and half hiring neocons that he plans on firing as soon as he chooses. That's what he does best, is fire people and move on. So it's an exciting time. The real bad stuff is going to happen between now and probably the first quarter. Once Trump gets in, I'll give him a couple of weeks with his new Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, who is an electronic market rigger from Goldman Sachs. That was his job. He was in charge of the IT department at Goldman Sachs because he worked with Robert Rubin and Hank Paulson, who were his bosses at Goldman, and they looked at him and said, okay, we want to rig this market and this market, and he wrote the programs to rig those markets. That's why he is being put in that spot. He's going to get into the spot. He'll be there for maybe a month. The system will all fall apart. He'll be one of the first that Trump fires, and then Trump will hire someone that he believes would be a good Treasury Secretary that'll head us back towards like a gold standard.
So why do you see the advantage? Why would Trump be playing the game that way? Why would he be appointing someone he plans on firing?
Well, if you have you have to blame someone. If the system falls apart, you got to get the blame in the right places, and the blame is going to go towards the banksters right now. Like right now, Trump can come out and say he's already said the market's in a bubble. He's already said he'd take care of, get rid of the Fed. So when this all happens, when it goes down, there will be bankers trying to save the day. And that was like Hank Paulson did in 2008 when he went to Congress with a gun and said, we need $700 billion and we need it now. Well, that is what's going to happen, except it's going to be $20 trillion. And Mr. Mnuchin is going to go to Congress and they're going to turn to him and say no. And that's when Trump can say, good, you're fired and I can hire someone that I want to hire. I forget the guy's name. His last name's Allison. It was a great conservative pick, and he was a libertarian guy, and everybody thought, Trump and him would be perfect. I think he's been told, you just hang on for a couple months until after the system crashes, and then we'll get you in to help, resurrect the system.
You made a comment earlier about how it doesn't matter the current level of U.S. debt because we're just owed it to ourselves. But isn't it the case that the U.S. people are on the hook for that money to private banks? Like this cabal of private banks that formed the Fed back in 1913, some of whom aren't even United States companies?
Well, no. I mean, what do you mean on the hook? I mean, the people, Congress has the power to create money at will. And whether or not, you call the people being on the hook, we, under the bad guys rule, we've kind of been on the hook. But, just because a handful of people say, well, you owe us, trillions in Federal Reserve notes, well, we can go to Congress, who goes to the mint, prints one coin for 100 trillion Federal Reserve notes and hands it to them and says, okay, we're paid up, walk away.
And the way history usually deals with power and wealth transfers, how would that likely play out in terms of, don't those people have incredible resources and incredible power, and wouldn't that be the start of sort of the end of all things?
Well, they don't. Their power lies in the acceptance of fiat money. Without fiat money, Hillary Clinton couldn't pay any of her henchmen to run around and take care of business. She would have no power. She would have zero power. Same with the Rothschilds and George Soros. Without any money, no mercenaries would do Soros's bidding. Nobody would listen to them. Look at the amount of money that George Soros pays to these Black Lives Matter and all these social engineering type of organizations. Without money, George Soros is a fat, old white man who's trying to meddle in everybody's business. But with money, he becomes this guy who can pull the strings. That's what we're getting to. We're getting to a place where fiat money goes away. It's gone. There is no more. There's no more debt. There's no more anything. Electronic system is going away, and that was the plan. Run it up, run it as long as you can, suck up all the benefits of unbacked fiat money, crash the system, and then return to a gold, silver standard.
That leads us to the last question of how does a rational individual prepare to protect themselves from the fallout of that kind of an event? Obviously, the natural conclusion, based on what you've been saying, is don't keep all your worth, your assets in electronic media anywhere, and don't keep them in fiat currency, for example. So what can a responsible person do to try to protect themselves as much as possible from the fallout of that?
Well, the obvious is to have some cash on hand, because cash is recognizable. When the banks close up, there'll be a couple weeks or months where people still accept cash at whoever's trying to sell something. But it all depends on how fast this transition is going to happen. The wipeout of Alan Greenspan's plan from the 1960s and 70s in the Road to Roota work was to reallocate money according to Social Security balances. I think it's a brilliant idea, because the people who paid in for the longest and the older people have more say, and they'd have the most skin in the game would get the most, and then those who have worked the best, the longest would get a little less and a little less and a little less. That's going to be part of the plan, I think, and it's good. But even in the Road to Roota documents that came out of the Fed Boston, they said they're not sure if the people would even accept that. And that's a great idea. So yeah, this has never really been experienced before. The end of a global world unbacked fiat monetary system has never happened, and we're going to learn the hard lesson. I think it'll be great in the end, especially for the United States, because we're the largest debtor nation in the world. And the problem right now, the largest problem in the world, is that everybody's in debt. You crash the banks and there is no more debt. Debt goes away.
Well, Bix, you always give us lots of thoughts to ponder, and we're grateful for you visiting us again here on Reluctant Preppers. Do you have any final thoughts for our subscribers before we let you go?
I do. I'm working on a report about the latest Economist magazine. It's called The World in 2017. I did reports on 2015, 2016, and they were both horrible, terrible signs, and a lot of them came true. And this one is completely different. And it's the more I dig into it, it's really telling us what's about to happen. yes, there's be a crash, but it's a great thing. And even in the cover, it says amazing things are about to happen.
Where can people follow your work and find out more?
You can get the book and sign up for emails at roadtoroota.com. The report, it's a report on the world in 2017, will come out middle of next week.
Very good. And Bix Weir, founder of roadtoroota.com. Thanks so much for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you, Duncan.